Every man you've ever admired, every empire that ever rose, every movement that ever shifted culture at its core began not with action, but with a script, not a written one, not a spoken one, a subconscious one, a silent programming running beneath the noise, shaping decisions, filtering perception, writing and rewriting reality without ever asking permission. And the most brutal truth no one tells you, you are not living your life, you are living your script, the one you inherited, not created, the one coded into you before you could speak, before you could say no, before you could even choose what to believe. Carl Jung called it the unconscious, the submerged cathedral of your psyche, where patterns repeat like ghosts. You call it instinct. You call it just the way I am. But the reality is far darker. It's just the way you were programmed. And until you face it, until you go into the basement of your mind with fire in your hand and say, I will no longer be run by a script I did not write, you will remain a slave to its rhythm. Because everything you do, your ambition, your hesitation, your self-sabotage, your grind, your procrastination, your pride, your insecurity, they all come from the script. You don't have habits. You have conditioning. You don't make decisions. You replay narratives. And the scariest part, most men will die in stories they never questioned. They will live entire lives inside cages with invisible walls, guarded not by force, but by familiarity. Because the subconscious doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your identity. And identity to the subconscious means what is safe, not what is true. So you can shout affirmations, post motivational quotes, grind until your soul is dust. But if your script says you are unworthy, you will find a way every time to lose. Not because you're lazy, but because your inner software doesn't allow you to hold what you're trying to chase. This is why discipline fails without depth. Why mindset fails without excavation. Why self-help becomes self-help when the core narrative remains untouched. Because you cannot outperform your subconscious. You can only reprogram it. And that process is not pretty. It's not glamorous. It doesn't happen in a weekend. It happens in the silence between who you were, told you are, and who you're ready to become. It happens when you finally look your patterns in the face, not with judgment, but with authority. You say, this fear is not mine. This belief was inherited and it ends with me. This version of me was useful, but he doesn't run the show anymore. That is when the rewrite begins. Not from the ego, but from the deep mind, the subconscious, the sacred control room of your entire life. And when you go there, when you rewrite from identity instead of inspiration, you don't just change your behavior. You change your trajectory. You stop reacting. You start creating. You stop surviving old scenes. You start authoring new acts. And reality bends, not because you forced it, but because you finally updated the script. And the moment you update that script, not just with hope, but with decision, your entire nervous system recalibrates. You stop flinching at success. You stop self-sabotaging when things feel too good. You stop abandoning yourself just to stay loyal to a version of you that was only ever built to survive. Because now you're not surviving. You're architecting. Brick by brutal brick, you become the man who writes his reality from the deepest layer of truth. Not the surface. Not the voice in your head that mimics your parents. Not the opinions of people who never did the work. But from the origin. The man who rewrites his subconscious rewrites the future. Not just his, but every future tied to his name, his children, his lineage, his impact. Because this is how generational curses are broken. Not with prayer alone, but with pattern interruption. And that interruption is violent. It means you wake up one day and say, no more autopilot, no more reactive loops, no more choosing safety and calling it wisdom. It means you stop waiting to feel worthy and start living like you are. Because your subconscious doesn't care about what you say. It cares about what you repeat. And if you keep repeating fear, hesitation, and the voice of the wounded boy, you keep creating from the wound. But when you repeat power, when you repeat presence, when you repeat internal authority, you begin to create from the healed man. In that man, he is dangerous. Not because he hurts others, but because he cannot be controlled. He no longer fears rejection. He no longer needs validation. He no longer falls under guilt, shame, or silence. Because he wrote a new script, a script that says, I am not here to repeat what broke me. I am here to rebuild what was never given to me. And from that place, discipline becomes devotion. Purpose becomes oxygen, and identity becomes unshakable. This is what they don't teach in schools. This is what they don't sell in programs, because this isn't the tactic. This is a transformation, one that begins the moment you decide, I will no longer let a script. I did not write, direct a life I am meant to lead. That is the line. That is the threshold. That is the gate. Every man must walk through if he ever wants to become the author of his own existence. And once you cross it, you never look back. Because the man who rewrites the script doesn't need to look back. He burned the pages behind him. Not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Because looking back is for those still uncertain, for those still secretly hoping the old story will redeem them. But you're done waiting to be rescued by what once wrecked you. You now understand that your past was not a prophecy. It was a program. And like any program, it can be rewritten, refactored, rebuilt, line by line, belief by belief, breath by breath, until the code no longer echoes trauma, but transcendence. That's when your subconscious becomes a weapon, a tool, a mirror that no longer haunts but hones. It reflects back, not what was done to you, but what you decided to become anyway. And that decision is what separates noise from legacy, boys from men, reactivity from rain. Because now, when life tests you, you don't default to the old reflexes. You pause, you process, you pivot with purpose. You're not reacting, you're responding. From a script you wrote sober, from beliefs you built consciously, from an identity that no longer fractures under pressure. And what happens next? The world starts to feel different. Not because it changed, but because your lens did, your filter, your internal reality. And when your internal reality shifts, you begin to experience the external world like a man who has reclaimed authorship. You no longer see problems, you see prompts. You no longer chase success, you align with it. You no longer seek love, you embody it. Because the script has changed. And everything you touch now responds not to your effort, but to your energy. This is the highest truth. The subconscious isn't just a background process. It's the architect of fate. And the moment you take it off autopilot, you take back the pen. The plot twists. The dialogue, the entire narrative arc of your existence. And from there, you don't just become better. You become unrecognizable in the best, most violent, most beautiful way. Because unrecognizable isn't a flaw. It's a signal that you've left the identity that kept you tolerable, predictable, safe, a signal that you've outgrown the limitations you once defended as just being realistic, a signal that the boy who needed to be understood has been replaced by the man who only needs to be true. That's what happens when you rewrite the subconscious. You stop trying to be palatable and start becoming powerful. Because now you're not running a script written by a teacher who misunderstood you, a parent who projected on you, a society that feared you. You're running a script that is forged in conscious fire, a script where every thought is aligned, every action is rooted, every word is spoken, not from reaction, but from rain. And this rain doesn't come from ego. It comes from ownership. You own your days now. You own your patterns. You own your pain, not as something to hide, but as something you harvest. Because when you harvest pain, you convert it. You transform it from weight to weapon, from history to heat, and that heat becomes your frequency, not to burn others, but to ignite everything you touch. This is where real transformation lives. Not in what you do, but in what you believe beneath what you do. And now you believe differently. You move differently. You lead differently. Not because of a strategy, but because of a script that no longer needs performance, because it runs on truth. You've stopped being a character in someone else's narrative. You've stopped auditioning for a part in a story that was never meant to elevate you. You are the author now. And from this moment forward, everything bends to that pen. Not because life is easy, but because you stopped living from your wounds and started living from your wisdom. You stopped recycling fear and started rewriting fate. This is not motivation. This is not mindset. This is metamorphosis, the kind that doesn't ask for applause, because your silence has already become so loud that it cannot be ignored. You didn't just change your life. You changed the source code. And the world, it has no choice now but to respond to the man who rewrote the script. And what follows a rewritten script is not applause, not celebration, not instant results. What follows is alignment, a quiet, irreversible shift, where people no longer recognize you and you no longer care. Because when the script changes, so do your surroundings. The same people who once fit don't. The same environments that once felt like home now feel like cages. The same dreams you once chased now feel too small. And that's not loss. That's proof. Proof that your subconscious no longer vibrates at the frequency of survival, but at the frequency of sovereignty. You're not looking for comfort. You're building kingdoms. You're not looking for validation. You are the verification. And the world will test this. It will send shadows to see if you return to your old lines, to see if the actor in you still remembers his part, to see if the healed man is still tempted by the hurt boy's script. But you won't flinch. You won't recite those lines because you burn the script. You don't play that role anymore. You don't belong to that plot. You are no longer available to be cast in tragedies that you didn't audition for, because now you are the director, the producer, the writer, and the character worthy of the ending he's been rewriting with blood and breath and bone. So when the next storm comes, and it will, don't respond with panic. Respond like a man whose internal script says, I am built for this. I am prepared. I am unwavering, because that is what the new script holds. Not fantasy, but fortitude. It doesn't promise you that life won't test you. It promises you that you will never test yourself again by doubting who you are. And that is the final rewrite. Not just of thought, not just of behavior, but of being. You become someone new, not because you changed what you do, but because you confronted what you believed. You stopped asking for life to go easier, and you started becoming the man who writes the ending differently. Every time, without fail. So let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them speculate how you became so clear, so steady, so transformed. And when they ask what happened, don't explain. Just smile and keep turning the page. Because your subconscious is the script. And now, you're the one writing it. Because the man who writes his own script doesn't pause for applause. He moves in rhythm with something deeper than approval. In truth, he no longer doubts his instincts, because those instincts have been rewired through fire. They don't come from fear, they come from foundation. A new operating system coded not by accident, but by intentional exposure to discomfort, to repetition, to the sacred solitude that births real power. And that power, it is not loud. It does not need to convince. It does not seek to be understood. Because when your subconscious finally reflects your highest self, you no longer walk into rooms asking, do I belong here? You walk in knowing, I built this. And from that knowing, everything flows differently. Your speech slows. Your eyes sharpen. Your presence becomes unnerving to those still living from chaos, because you are no longer programmable. You've burned the codes of conformity. You've dissolved the commands of compliance. And now you write your story with a hand that no longer shakes, because your belief system is anchored in alignment. And that's when the world bends. Not immediately, not easily, but inevitably. Because nothing can resist a man whose internal world is congruent. Not opportunity, not relationships, not even time. Time begins to obey the man who obeys his inner architecture. Every hour feels heavier not with pressure, but with purpose. Your mornings become sacred. Your routines become ritual. Your decisions no longer feel like choices. They feel like non-negotiables. Because when you've rewritten the script, you don't second-guess the character. You become the character, not one based on wounds, not one shaped by culture, but one forged in clarity, conviction, and coded with the voice of a man who finally remembers who he was before the world told him to forget. That's the real you. And now you live in such alignment with him that you can't even pretend to be the old you anymore. The costume doesn't fit. The voice doesn't sound right. The mask falls off at every word, because now there's nothing left to hide. There's only the truth you build from the inside out. And that is the script the world needs. Not another show, not another performance, but a man who became real, line by line, choice by choice, breath by breath. You rewrote the subconscious, and you became the soul. And the soul doesn't lie. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't break under pressure, because it's not made of the world. It's made of something older, something immortal, something incorruptible. You see, when you rewrite the subconscious, you don't just change your behavior, you awaken the archetype buried inside you. The king, the warrior, the sage, the architect. These are not roles. These are realities coded into your DNA, dormant, until activated by a man brave enough to kill his false self, to drop the image, to shed the performance, to face the void and say, if I must lose everything to find the truth, so be it. And that's when you find it, or more accurately, it finds you. That voice, that knowing, that feeling in your bones that you were never meant to obey this world. You were meant to redefine it. You were not put here to live out a program. You were put here to build a paradigm. But that requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of noise, of distraction, of comfort, of every petty addiction you use to protect yourself from the core. And when you make that sacrifice, not once, but daily, ritually, with reverence, you begin to live in syphoria. That sacred state of inner alignment, where your thoughts, your breath, your posture, and your choices all sing in unison. No more misalignment, no more self-sabotage, no more double lives, just clarity, just presence, just a man who walks as one. And when you walk like that, you don't speak to prove. You speak to shift the field. You speak to create. You speak only when your silence can no longer contain the truth trying to erupt through your being. That's not charisma. That's not branding. That's real power. And real power is rare because it's earned, because it's integrated. And you've integrated. You've endured. You've descended into the layers of your own code and returned not fixed, but forged. Now the subconscious is no longer your limit. It's your launch pad. Now your days are not cycles. They are commands. Now your life is not a story you hope will unfold. It's a kingdom you are building in real time because you rewrote the script. And with it, you rewrote reality. Because once you become the truth, the search ends. The war quiets. The masks fall away. And what's left is the one thing this world cannot manufacture, cannot mimic, cannot market. A man whose subconscious and soul speak the same language. No conflict, no confusion, no contradiction, only congruence, only clarity, only command. This is where most men turn back. Because this level of self-ownership leaves no one to blame. No more parents, no more past, no more pain masquerading as identity. But you didn't turn back. You stood in the fire, let it consume the versions of you that were never real, and emerged not clean, but clear. Because clarity isn't found, clarity is forged. It is burned into you through repetition, solitude, and the ruthless refusal to live a single moment out of alignment. And that's what separates you now. You are no longer trying to change your life. You already did, from the inside, from the roots, from the script level of reality where few ever have the courage to go. You've become the man whose choices are no longer powered by mood, but by mission. You don't wake up wondering what to do. You wake up remembering who you are. And from that remembrance, your entire world reconfigures. People leave, doors close, new doors open. But none of it moves you, because now you move the narrative. Now you write in bold. Now you breathe in structure and exhale standard. You're no longer on the path. You are the path. You are the reminder, the signal, the myth made real, and the man who becomes myth, who leads from internal law instead of external longing, is a man the world must follow, not because he asks, but because he rewrote the script so completely. The entire system had no choice but to realign in his presence. Now go, not with ego, but with the quiet gravity of a man who has taken the pen from the past and finally, written his own name in permanent power. So here you are now, at the edge of who you used to be and the threshold of who you were always meant to become. You've walked through the mirror. You've shattered the illusion. You've gone beneath the affirmations, the routines, the strategies, and you've rewritten the source, not with fluff, not with force, but with fire. And now you walk with something ancient in your chest, something no one can give you, something no one can fake. Authority, not the kind given by titles, the kind that reverberates through your bones, because you finally remembered what it means to be the architect of your own reality. You no longer beg life to be fair. You command it to be aligned. You no longer fear the future, because the man writing it is you, not the fractured you, not the addicted, ashamed, or abandoned you, but the forged you, the fireborn, internally governed, identity-led you. You are no longer a man of emotion. You are a man of direction. You are no longer driven by what the world reflects. You are driven by what your soul remembers, that you were never meant to live someone else's story. You were born to become the living proof that a man can descend into himself, rewrite the subconscious code of his life, and rise as something unshakable. And now you are that proof, not tomorrow, not when you feel like it. Now, because it was never about perfection. It was about possession, the possession of your own mind, your own story, your own frequency. And now you don't chase peace. You are peace. You don't chase power. You radiate it, because when the subconscious script aligns with the soul's mission, there is no force in this world that can keep that man from becoming who he was sent here to be. So walk. Walk like a man who no longer explains himself. Walk like a man whose presence is a prayer. Walk like a man who has buried every version of himself that once doubted, delayed, and disappeared. And now walks as a sovereign, because your subconscious is the script. And now, for the first time in your life, you are finally the author. Write well, write wisely, write like a man who will never again be written by the world, only by truth, only by fire, only by you,